if you feel like your current job is draining your very soul, don't worry. Tonight, I have a special kind of therapy. Let's relive a profession so awful, it'll make your deadlines look like a vacation. Maybe you're exhausted from a demanding boss, unanswered emails, or that office chair that now knows the exact shape of your butt. But imagine this instead. Instead of your morning coffee, you inhale a scent that can only be described as the human condition giving up. That's right. You're a gong farmer, a medieval waste collector, a humble farmer of the things no one else dares to touch. Welcome to the night shift. You trudge through cobbled alleys, the lantern flickering against damp stone walls. The city above sleeps, but beneath its silence lies a continent of filth. Every house, every tavern, every public convenience contributes to your nightly buffet. The stench alone could peel paint off a cathedral door. You breathe through your mouth, big mistake, and realize this is not a scent you can escape. It lives in your soul now. Your job is simple in theory. Clean out the cesspits and privies before dawn. But each pit is a tomb of secrets, the detritus of daily life. Food scraps, straw, bones, lost trinkets, and occasionally something darker. In late 14th century London, there were only 16 public latrines for a population of 30,000. Everyone else used a simple pit at home. And when those pits filled up, you were the one called to clean them out. It was steady work, sure, but filthy, thankless, and miserable. The title, Gong Farmer, comes from the Old English gang, meaning to go. Yes, the entire linguistic foundation of your profession is built on the polite act of going. You are the original sanitation engineer, except your uniform is soaked in despair and bodily fluids. You can't start before 9 p.m. The law forbids it. The city won't let you disturb polite society with the sight or scent of your labor. So you and your companions, a gang of nocturnal diggers, march out like sewer monks, hooded and humble. You'll work until dawn, when the church bells toll and your existence must vanish before people wake. Your first stop tonight, a tavern privy behind a fishmonger's shop. Perfect. You lower your lantern into the pit and see what looks like a dark lagoon of misery. It's knee-deep already, glistening like a stew no one ordered. You take a breath, mutter something halfway between a prayer and a curse, and climb down. The wood creaks. Somewhere beneath, centuries of fermentation bubble like demonic laughter. One wrong move, and you'll join the long line of gong farmers who didn't make it back up. The tale of Richard the Raker is legend among your kind, a man who fell through a rotten ceiling into a pit and drowned in human waste in 1326. You think of him as a patron saint of occupational hazards. The shovel hits something solid. You dig. The air grows hotter, heavier. You wonder what's worse, the stench or the silence. It's in that silence that you start to reflect on life. How every king, every priest, every merchant produces the same humble byproduct that ends up in your bucket. Equality, you realize, isn't found in law. It's found in the latrine you haul the first bucket up. Two boys, hired helpers barely old enough to know regret, carry it to the waiting cart. Each full load earns you a few shillings, enough to buy stale bread, ale, and a fleeting illusion of dignity. But even pay can't buy social acceptance. You are forbidden to live within the city's respectable walls. Your home is on the outskirts, among tanners, butchers, and other pariahs of necessity. Still, the economics are strangely comforting. 2 shillings per ton of waste. Not bad if you ignore the respiratory damage. In some royal estates like Hampton Court, even Elizabeth Fewern's gong farmers were paid 6 pence a day. Not fortune, not fame, but at least enough to survive the stink. You rest your shovel against the wall and look up at the stars peeking through smoke. Somewhere above, in castles and chambers, noblemen sit on padded stools lined with velvet, discussing policy while doing the same biological act that sustains your profession. Some even have attendants, grooms of the stool, noblemen whose career goal was literally to assist royal defecation. But that's a story for later. For now, the city's underbelly awaits. The night stretches on. You move from house to house, each pit deeper and more mysterious than the last. Sometimes you find jewelry, lost rings, bones of unidentifiable origin. Once, a small wooden doll, face worn smooth by centuries of decay. You wonder what stories these objects could tell, and what parts of history have been flushed away. By the time you finish the last pit, your arms ache, your lungs burn, and your sense of smell has resigned. The cart creaks under the weight of barrels filled with night soil. Soon, you'll haul it beyond the city limits to dump or sell it as fertilizer. Nothing is wasted here. Not even waste itself. You wipe your brow with the back of your sleeve and smile faintly. This is hell, yes. But it's a living hell with overtime pay. You keep walking through the sleeping city, your cart squeaking behind you like an exhausted donkey. The cobblestones are slick with something you don't want to identify. The moon hangs low and tired, just like you. Somewhere, a cat hisses, perhaps offended by your scent, or envious of your freedom to defile alleys without guilt. But before we go deeper into tonight's collection, you should understand where all this filth comes from. See, the medieval toilet wasn't so much a design as it was a confession. Humanity, admitting it, had no idea what to do with itself. Let's start at the top, quite literally. In castles, toilets were often carved into the stone walls, perched like bird nests for nobles to perch on. The waste dropped straight down a vertical shaft, sometimes into the moat below, where it mingled with ducks, fish, and the occasional invader who made poor tactical decisions. Bodiam Castle in East Sussex had 28 of these chutes, all emptying into the moat, which, if you think about it, made swimming a kind of baptism in collective shame. At Dover Castle, they even built multi-tiered latrines stacked like a medieval high-rise plumbing nightmare, all feeding into a single cesspit at the base of the keep. Meanwhile, farmers downstream scooped up what floated away, using it as fertilizer. Recycling, they called it. Sustainability, you call it. If you lived in a town, though, the experience was far less architecturally impressive. The average citizen had a pit dug under their house or in the backyard, covered with a wooden seat, sometimes with a bucket, often not. It filled up over months or years, until one day the floorboards groaned, and the family decided it was time to call you. And if you think your boss's office smells bad after lunch, imagine a medieval street on a summer afternoon. The gutters ran with urine, the cesspits frothed under heat, and the local apothecaries swore by remedies like holding a dried orange under one's nose. It didn't help. Even the oranges gave up eventually. The most desperate solution? Throw it out the window. Yes, it was common practice to dump a chamber pot directly onto the street, usually accompanied by a polite shout of, "Gardez l'eau." The water, of course, wasn't water. The unlucky passerby learned this lesson once. Only once. That's where you, the gong farmer, became civilization's invisible guardian. You weren't just cleaning. You were keeping disease at bay. Before anyone knew about germs, before anyone could spell sanitation, your nightly work prevented plagues from thriving faster than they already did. But you weren't thanked. You were tolerated. Barely. The laws required you to haul the waste outside city walls before dawn. It was then dumped in designated areas or along the river, like at London's infamous Dung Wharf, a spot that, in a cosmic joke of history, later became the site of the Mermaid Theatre. Imagine actors reciting Shakespeare above a former ocean of sewage. Art really does come from suffering. When you reached these dumping grounds, you joined a chorus of carts, each overflowing with barrels of night soil. Steam rose from them in the morning chill, like the city exhaling its sins. Sometimes, the waste was sold to farmers for use as fertilizer. Other times, it was simply buried and forgotten, until someone decided to build a house on top of it centuries later, and archaeology students had the time of their lives. Back then, the cesspits themselves were marvels of community engineering. Some were shared between multiple houses, separated by thin walls that leaked diplomacy in the worst possible way. Others had wooden chutes connecting upper floors to the pit below, luxury plumbing by medieval standards. Rainwater occasionally helped flush things along, though more often it just made the pits overflow like an enthusiastic volcano of regret. And oh, the smell. Chroniclers of the time didn't bother describing it. They just mentioned that the air was thick. You imagine it was the kind of smell that could ruin faith in both humanity and God. Some said the odor traveled faster than gossip, and in medieval towns, that's saying something. You realize something profound, standing knee-deep in the residue of history. Civilization is a sandwich built on layers of waste. Empires rise, kings rule, poets write. And you, shovel in hand, make it all possible. You are the foundation, the literal infrastructure of daily life. Without you, the streets would overflow, and the castles would collapse into their own filth. It's strange, isn't it? You're the lowest of the low, but without you, no one can live high. As you finish tonight's first route, the eastern horizon starts to pale. You still have 6 pits left, 3 barrels full, and 0 illusions about glory. But you do have perspective. And maybe that's the richest thing anyone can dig up here. You stretch your back, wipe your brow with a rag that's long past saving, and whisper to yourself, "At least I'm not the one swimming in it." You pause beside a narrow alley, half hidden behind the bakery. The sweet smell of bread is the only mercy you'll get tonight. Somewhere nearby, a rat squeaks. You swear it sounds judgmental. You look at your filthy hands and wonder, if this is your fate, what must heaven smell like? But as you shovel, another thought bubbles up. Even kings had to go. And somehow, they made that into politics. Yes, the royal toilet. Sorry, close stool was the throne before the throne. It was a portable wooden box lined with velvet cushions, containing a pewter pot beneath. In the 1500s, the King of England sat on this padded seat daily, contemplating matters of state while simultaneously lightening his own. Now, you might assume this was a private affair. You'd be wrong. Because while you toil in the shadows, up in the palace, there exists one of history's strangest honors. The groom of the stool, the lucky noble whose job was to assist the king with his most personal business. Yes, to attend his majesty in all movements of importance. It started humbly enough. In 1497, a servant named Hugh Dennis received a written order to construct a close stool for King Henry VII, lined with black velvet, fringed with silk, and accompanied by pewter basins for washing. Over time, though, this man's proximity to royal privacy became proximity to royal secrets. By Henry VIII's reign, the groom of the stool was practically the king's confidant. As the monarch relieved himself, he'd discuss policy, confess doubts, and even draft royal decrees. And the groom, crouched discreetly nearby, absorbed every word. Some grooms wielded so much influence, they were feared by entire courts. Sir Anthony Denny, Henry VIII's own groom, even held the royal stamp, essentially the king's signature, granting him power to act in the monarch's name. You can't help but laugh, standing knee-deep in someone else's cesspit. At least your boss doesn't invite you to watch him poop and run the empire. Still, the irony stings. You, the gong farmer, are cursed with shame though you keep cities clean. Yet the groom of the stool, who literally handled the royal rear end, is showered in gold and respect. It's a cruel equation of class. The higher the stink, the greater the title, as long as it belongs to a king. You picture the royal chamber, rich tapestries, flickering candles, and a faint smell of lavender trying to mask something that lavender should never have to. The king sits on velvet, contemplating conquest. His groom stands by, holding basin and towel, ready to serve. The same act you perform in the dark is here elevated to ceremony, a ritual of intimacy and power. And just as you must disappear before dawn, so too must the groom vanish into discretion. He cannot gossip. His silence is his salary. Yet everyone knows he whispers into the king's ear at moments of, shall we say, release. Perhaps that's why court politics always had a certain smell about it. Sometimes you wonder, would you rather be down here, shoveling filth, or up there, flattering it? One has dignity in labor. The other has influence in waste. The contrast is absurd enough to make you grin. You picture yourself knocking on palace doors one night, bucket in hand, shouting, "Evening collection, Your Majesty. I charge extra for velvet." But then you think of the other end of this royal plumbing system. The waste doesn't vanish. It joins yours, dumped eventually in the same fields, feeding the same crops. You might starve, the king might feast, yet both rely on the same circle of life. What's eaten must one day return. A humbling truth, though you doubt any monarch would advertise it on a coat of arms. You pause, shovel in midair, as a thought passes through you. Perhaps civilization's greatest secret isn't its art or architecture, but its capacity to hide what it doesn't want to see. For the noble, that means curtains and perfumes. For you, it means darkness and distance. But it's the same instinct, the same denial, wrapped in silk or rags. When the church bells toll midnight, you move on, dragging your cart past a grand manor house. You imagine its owner sitting upon a carved seat, whispering prayers to a god who surely has more pressing concerns. Inside, servants scurry, chamber pots clatter, and someone sighs in relief. And outside, you, the city's hidden custodian, collect what's left behind, reminding history that progress is built not only on stone, but on what we choose to bury beneath it. Tonight, the contrast between royalty and reality couldn't be clearer. Some sit on velvet to do their business. Others shovel it out afterward. Yet both depend on each other, more than either would ever admit.
At least my throne never lies.
By now, your shovel feels heavier than sin itself. The moon's halfway gone, and your shoulders ache from carrying what poets might politely call the burden of civilization. You pause to rest beside the pit, sitting on an overturned bucket that you hope is empty. Welcome to another glamorous night in the empire of excrement. The cesspit before you is half full, which means it's your unlucky job to make it half empty. This one's particularly vile, a thick stew of straw, rotten food, and something that once dreamed of being cheese. Somewhere inside, you think you hear bubbles, like the pit itself is breathing. You wonder what's worse, the smell or the mystery. But there's no time for hesitation. You grab your shovel, plant your boots in the sludge, and start digging. The texture is indescribable. Every scoop sounds like history's worst applause. You gag once, twice, then mutter your usual mantra. 2 shillings a ton, 2 shillings a ton. It's the medieval version of motivational speaking. You're not alone, of course. A pair of boys, no older than 12, wade above with ropes and buckets. They're called tub lifters, and they work barefoot, because shoes don't survive this business. They pull up each load and dump it into the barrel on your cart. Sometimes they joke, sometimes they cry. Sometimes they just stare into the pit like little philosophers, learning early what it means to be mortal. By dawn, you'll have filled 3, maybe 4 barrels. The waste will be hauled outside the city and sold to farmers, who call it night soil. The irony isn't lost on you. Human waste, feeding the same crops that feed humans again. A perfect loop of appetite and amnesia. The job has its dangers, of course. A rotten floorboard could collapse. A noxious fume could choke you unconscious. Sometimes, when the pit is too deep, you tie a rope around your waist, just in case your coworkers have to haul you up like a lost bucket. Every gong farmer knows the story of Richard the Raker, the man who fell into a cesspit in 1326 and never came back out. His death became both a warning and a joke. Some say his ghost still haunts the city drains, whispering, "Check the floorboards first." You check them anyway. Some pits are so old that layers of waste form like geological strata. Dig deep enough, and you can practically read the history of the household. Oyster shells, pig bones, bits of pottery, half a wooden comb. It's a kind of archaeology if you squint past the nausea. You once found a silver ring, sold it for enough to buy clean clothes and a loaf of bread. That was your lucky night. But there are darker discoveries too. Every gong farmer eventually finds something they wish they hadn't. A tiny skull, a cloth bundle, or the unmistakable weight of silence in the shovel. No one talks about it. You just hand it over to the authorities and move on. The pit never judges. It just keeps what the world hides. Still, there's a rhythm to this misery. Scoop, lift, dump, breathe, curse, repeat. After a while, it feels like meditation. A horrible, smelly meditation in the church of necessity. You think about all the people sleeping comfortably above you, dreaming of heaven, while you toil in what looks suspiciously like the other place. You think of their dinners, stews and pies and roasted meats, all destined to become your problem within days. What goes down, you mutter, must come up. You're practically a philosopher now, albeit one who smells like 1,000 regrets. Some of your fellow gong farmers have a strange pride in their work. They say it's honest, that someone must do it, that the pay's better than starving. They even brag about their endurance, like soldiers of sanitation. You suppose they're right. It's hard to feel small when you hold the city's filth in your hands. But you also know the unspoken truth. No matter how essential you are, no one will thank you. The baker won't nod when you pass. The priest won't shake your hand. Even the rats seem to think they're better company. And yet, you keep digging, because beneath all the filth and mockery, there's a strange dignity in survival. You don't need fine clothes or royal favor. You just need lungs strong enough to handle the stench, arms steady enough to lift what others refuse to see, and the patience to wait for dawn. That moment when the city wakes, pretending the streets are clean, by miracle. Your shovel hits something solid again. Wood this time. You've reached the bottom. You smile, almost triumphant, as you climb out, dripping in history. The two boys cheer weakly. Even they can appreciate a pit well done. You stretch, look at the glowing edge of the horizon, and whisper, "Another one emptied. Another one to go." Somewhere nearby, a rooster crows. You shake your head. Even he doesn't know the meaning of morning shifts. The night deepens. The air thickens. Every step feels like wading through a history nobody wanted to write down. You pull your cart through a crooked lane lined with taverns, bakeries, and houses where candles flicker behind greasy windows. The city above slumbers, unaware that under its cobbles, you are conducting the most necessary opera in town. A rat scurries across your path, pauses to sniff your boot, and then flees. Even vermin know when to keep their distance. And then it happens. That moment every gong farmer dreads. A wind shift, the smell turns alive. It has layers. Sour from the breweries, sweet from decay. Something fishy from the docks, and the unmistakable tang of human contribution. It wraps around your face like a warm, invisible scarf of suffering. Your eyes water. You gag, cough, curse, and finally laugh, because there's nothing else left to do. You've smelled the truth of civilization, and it smells like defeat. Tonight's pit is old, one of the city's largest. It belongs to an inn that's been serving travelers since the plague years. You descend into its darkness like an explorer of hell's shallows. The ladder creaks. The pit breathes. And then, splash. Your boot sinks deep. You mutter a prayer to every saint you can recall. You're not religious, but in this line of work, divine assistance feels like part of the job description. You start shoveling, each motion slow and steady. The lantern's glow reflecting off the slick walls like golden lies. There's a rhythm to it now. Scoop, lift, dump, breathe, regret, repeat. The boys above heave the buckets, pouring their contents into barrels. The sound is wet, final, and somehow comforting. Then you hear a sound that freezes your spine, the faint crack of old wood. You look up. The beam above your head shudders. Dust falls like cursed snow. You remember the story of Richard the Raker, the man who drowned in his own livelihood when the cesspit roof gave way. They said the city buried him with honors, or perhaps just out of self-defense, to stop the smell. Either way, his legend lingers. The first martyr of modern sanitation. You hold your breath until the beam settles. It doesn't fall. Not tonight. You live another hour. The fumes grow heavier. Without ventilation, the pit becomes a poison chamber. Some say it's the methane. Others call it demon gas. Whatever it is, it kills quick. That's why gong farmers carry candles, not for light, but for warning. When the flame flickers, you climb out fast. No one wants to be found in the morning with lungs full of the city's sins. You climb back up, gasping, every pore drenched in history's byproduct. The innkeeper waits nearby, pinching his nose and pretending gratitude. He hands you a few coins with 2 fingers, like the coins might catch the smell. They will. Everything does. You load the barrels, their lids barely holding back the steam. The cart groans as you pull it toward the gate. The cobblestones glisten under moonlight, or maybe that's something else. You don't want to know. Halfway down the road, you stop by the river to rinse your hands. It doesn't help. The water itself carries a familiar perfume. Half the city empties into it. You watch it swirl away, carrying your night's labor toward some distant farmer who will spread it on his fields. The river forgets, the soil forgets, the crops forget, and the people eat. The great circle of consumption continues. You can't help but laugh again. We're all just eating each other, you murmur. Just slower. A soft rain begins to fall. Merciful, disguising the smell for a moment. The drops hiss as they hit the barrels, like the sky trying to sanitize what it can't forgive. You tilt your head up and let it wash your face. For a brief second, you imagine being clean. Then lightning flashes, and the illusion breaks. The road ahead gleams with puddles, each one reflecting the life you never asked for. But you keep walking, because that's what gong farmers do. You move forward through the filth, so others don't have to. The city gate looms ahead. Beyond it lies the dumping ground, a stretch of mud and misery known as Mount Pleasant, though no one calls it that without irony. It's where all the city's secrets go to die, and you're their funeral director. A guard nods you through without a word. He's seen your kind before. You tip your hat, a gesture of mutual disgust, and roll onward into the dark. Behind you, the city sleeps soundly, dreaming its clean dreams. Ahead, the horizon glows faintly, like the promise of morning. Or maybe just another fire at the dung wharf. You keep moving, because dawn waits for no one, and the stink never sleeps. The rain fades before dawn. The city walls glow faintly under a pale horizon, and your cart, groaning under the weight of humanity's collective conscience, rolls toward its final destination, the dumping ground. The night's harvest of misery is almost complete. This is where the economics of your existence come to light. Because what you've collected, every bucket of filth, every barrel of sludge, isn't just waste. It's currency. The medieval world runs not only on gold or grain, but also, quite literally, on excrement. Welcome to the marketplace of manure. You arrive at the edge of London, a place politely known as Dung Wharf. Here, before the sun climbs, a line of carts stretches along the riverbank. You nod to the other gong farmers, pale, sleepless silhouettes with eyes like extinguished candles. You all share a camaraderie forged in the fumes. The process is simple. The waste you've gathered overnight gets sold by weight. A few shillings for a barrel, depending on how rich the content appears, meaning how much solid material it contains. The more concentrated the misery, the higher the value. You could almost call it quality control if you had the will to care. Buyers arrive just after sunrise. Farmers, gardeners, and traders who've learned that what city dwellers discard can make their fields bloom. They call it night soil, though that name feels too poetic for what it really is. Still, it sells. Some of your finest product, yes, you think that word with a grim chuckle, gets shipped by barge up the River Thames, bound for the surrounding countryside. There, it will be spread over fields to fertilize the crops that feed the same people who will, in turn, create the next batch of supply. It's the ultimate closed economy, the circle of stink. You lean against your cart, watching the barrels being rolled onto boats. Steam rises from them in the morning chill, curling like ghosts above the river. You imagine these mists as the souls of the city's dinners. Roast goose, mutton pies, ale, all returning to nature. Philosophically speaking, you think, it's beautiful. Practically speaking, it's disgusting. Not all waste meets such noble fates. Some goes to the great dumping hills like Mount Pleasant in Clerkenwell, a towering monument of decay that by 1780 covered 7.5 acres of land. Even now, you can see the smaller mounds forming, the city's shadow growing upward. Occasionally, disputes break out among gong farmers over who has the right to a certain neighborhood or dumping site. There's profit here, after all. You've heard of fights ending with men swinging shovels not as tools, but as weapons. There's even gossip about gangs of farmers marking territories with symbols scratched into alley walls. Urban warfare, medieval style, fought over the right to move manure. Yet, for all the hardship, you understand the deeper irony. Your work underpins the very concept of civilization. Without sanitation, cities die. Without you, pestilence wins. You, the most despised of men, are also the most indispensable. Society depends on you, while pretending you don't exist. You think of the nobles again, those who wrinkle their powdered noses at your kind, yet dine on food grown from your nightly harvest. You grin, imagining their grand banquets as silent partnerships between you and them. Every loaf of bread, every apple on their tables, carries your invisible signature. There's a certain satisfaction in that. It's not revenge, just symmetry. The same mouths that call you filth live off what your hands deliver. If only they knew how many of their roses bloom because of you. Some gong farmers develop an entrepreneurial streak. They strike deals directly with farmers, collecting not only from cesspits, but also from butchers and tanners, mixing the waste into more nutrient-rich blends. The truly ambitious ones even form small cooperatives, medieval sanitation startups, you might say. The margins are modest, but in a world that worships survival, modesty is enough. As the sun rises, You watch the buyers depart, carts creaking under their fragrant cargo. The city, once again, has been cleansed, at least for another day. People will wake soon, stretch, open their shutters, and breathe what they think is fresh air. You smile at the irony. Their morning peace is your night's labor. You wipe your hands on your apron and lean against the now empty cart. The first bells of the day ring in the distance. A baker's boy runs past with warm loaves, their golden crusts glistening. You catch the smell of bread again, the same scent that greeted you hours ago before the pits. Somehow, it smells better now. Earned, almost. You think of heading home, to the small cottage outside the city walls, where the wind still carries faint traces of freedom. And of course, the other Gong farmers' work. You'll rest, wash in the river, pointless but habitual, and maybe even dream of something clean. But before you leave, you take one last look at the dumping ground, the kingdom of rot that keeps the world turning. You feel something like pride, faint but stubborn. You've turned disgust into sustenance, filth into fertility, anonymity into purpose. In an economy where everything decays, you've found a way to make decay pay. Even gold tarnishes, but this never runs out. By mid-morning, the carts have gone and the city begins to stir. Bakers are shouting, blacksmiths are hammering, and merchants are already arguing about leaf prices and wool. You, though, are invisible again. A shadow that slips through the streets when everyone else starts their day. This is the part no one tells you about. Not the stink, not the danger, but the silence that follows. After all the scraping, the lifting, the endless slog, there's just quiet. The streets are clean, the barrels empty, the people oblivious. You lean against your cart and realize you don't belong to either world. Not quite part of the night, not welcome in the day. Respect, it seems, has a smell too. And yours clears the room before you speak. When you walk into the marketplace to buy bread, the vendor pretends not to see you. Her smile fades the second your shadow touches the stall. Coins from your hand are accepted only after they've been rinsed in a bucket. You get used to it. The flinching, the sideways glances, the way conversations pause when you pass. The city depends on you, but would rather forget you exist. You are, as the scholars might one day write, the necessary unmentionable. You've learned to live on the city's edge, literally. Gong farmers aren't allowed within the main walls. Your house sits near the tanners and butchers, where the air already smells too rough for polite noses. Your neighbors don't complain. They're outcasts too, united by the same unwanted expertise, making filth disappear. Sometimes, when you cross the bridge at sunset, you see noblemen riding past, their cloaks fluttering like banners of detachment. You smile at them, not mockingly, but knowingly. You've handled what they pretend doesn't exist. You've stared into the hole that swallows their comfort and come back alive. Still, there are moments when the loneliness bites harder than the odor. You hear laughter from taverns that won't serve you, music from feasts that would faint at your arrival. You stand outside and listen, hands in your pockets, knowing that you've helped make those carefree nights possible. The irony isn't lost on you. The cleaner you make the city, the less it wants to see you. But there's something else too. A quiet pride that grows each time you finish a job. Because for all the mockery and disgust, no one can deny that when the pits overflow, the city calls you. Not the priest, not the merchant, not even the mayor. You, the man in the mud. It gives you a strange kind of confidence, one the perfumed elite will never understand. You don't need their titles or tapestries. You have proof of purpose under your fingernails, and you've seen things they never will. You've seen the underbelly of the city, the bones of feasts, the jewelry of the dead, the letters that were never meant to be found. You've heard the secrets of houses through their refuse. What they eat, what they break, what they throw away when no one's watching. You know their truth. In that knowledge, there's a certain power. You carry it silently, like a priest carrying confessions that no one else dares hear. There's one memory that always stays with you. It was winter, bitter cold, the kind that freezes the river and makes your breath a cloud of ghosts. You were clearing the pit of a rich merchant's house when you struck something solid. A chest. Not big, but heavy. Inside were coins, real silver ones, stamped with the king's seal. You never told anyone. You buried the chest beneath your cottage floor, not out of greed, but out of irony. The city's richest man had hidden his wealth in filth, and you, the poorest, had found it there. You often think about that chest when you lie awake, a reminder that, in the end, everything valuable ends up covered in dirt. Still, even the faintest touch of dignity can't fully erase the shame. The children in the street call you Night Nose. The women cover their faces when you pass. When the church holds mass, you sit outside, because no matter how hard you scrub, the smell clings like a curse. But that's the trade-off of being essential. The world uses you and pretends it doesn't. You've learned to live with that paradox, that civilization's clean conscience depends on your dirty hands. You stop by the river again on your way home. The morning mist glows gold, and the water carries away the night's filth. You watch a boat pass, nobles heading toward their estates, talking politics and perfume. Somewhere downriver, a farmer is spreading your hard-earned product on his fields, praising its richness. You smile faintly. It's a strange kind of immortality, to know you'll live on in every loaf of bread, every apple, every blooming rose. That's your quiet revenge. While others chase glory, you've mastered the art of remaining unseen, yet unforgettable. Because long after kings are forgotten, someone will still have to shovel what's left behind. And you, for better or worse, were here first. The sky is the color of tin when you start your final walk home. The city yawns awake behind you. Chimney smoke rising, church bells tolling, merchants shouting their daily lies about fresh fish. You smile at that. You know what fresh really means here. Your cart rattles along the road, lighter now. The barrel's empty but still smelling like guilt. The horses snort, eager for rest. You feel the same. Weary, grimy, proud. It's the peculiar pride that comes not from glory, but from survival. Every night in the pit feels like a small war. You fight gravity, stench, fatigue, and the very air you breathe. But there's victory in the sunrise. Proof that you've outlived the darkness once again. As you reach the outskirts, you pass the fields where your work ends up. Rows of crops stretching toward the horizon, their leaves glistening with dew. You know what feeds them. You know the truth behind every apple and cabbage and barley stalk. And somehow, that makes the world both funnier and sadder. You stop beside a patch of soil that smells faintly familiar. A farmer waves from afar, loading his cart with produce. You wave back. Your colleagues, in a way, two ends of the same noble pipeline. He grows, you clear. He feeds, you clean. Together, you keep the circle turning. You sit on a stump, stretch your legs, and look at your hands. Cracked, blackened, the nails permanently tinted with proof of purpose. You once hated these hands. Now you just respect them. They've held worse things than most men can imagine, and still they steady your bread each morning. The sun climbs higher. Your eyes sting, not from the light, but from knowing that soon the day crowd will begin to gossip again. By noon, you'll be invisible once more, the man behind the miracle of cleanliness. And yet, you've learned something that no scholar or noble could ever grasp. that civilization isn't defined by its palaces, but by its pits. A city's true measure lies in how it handles its own mess, in who it buries, who it pays, and who it forgets. You chuckle, thinking of the groom of the stool, that velvet-clad confidant of kings. The world may worship gold embroidery, but at least your honesty doesn't smell of perfume and hypocrisy. You shovel what is real. You remember the first night you took this job, the horror, the gagging, the moment you swore you'd quit by dawn. But dawn came, and you didn't. Then another, and another. Somewhere along the way, disgust turned to routine, and routine turned to reflection. You started to see the strange poetry in it all. Because here's the secret no one tells you. After a while, the smell fades. Not from the air, but from your fear. You stop fighting it. You accept it. You find rhythm in the absurdity, calm in the chaos, purpose in the muck. You stop seeing filth and start seeing the system. You start seeing the truth. That no matter how high one climbs, from peasants to princes, everyone sits on the same invisible throne. Everyone contributes to the empire you clean. The difference is honesty. You've never pretended to be clean. You've just made peace with dirt. A breeze sweeps through the fields, stirring the smell of wet soil and new life. You close your eyes and inhale. It's faint, earthy, almost sweet. The ghost of last night's labor reborn as morning. You rise slowly, feeling the ache in your knees, the heaviness in your chest, the quiet pride in your heart. You pat your horse, whisper thanks, and start toward home. Your cottage waits by the riverbank, small, crooked, peaceful. You'll hang your lantern, wash your hands in the cold stream, and let the world forget you until the sun falls again. And when it does, you'll pick up the shovel, light the lantern, and descend once more into the underworld of necessity. Because someone must. Because civilization, for all its crowns and cathedrals, still depends on a few unseen hands to keep it standing. And you, humble collector of what humanity leaves behind, will keep the darkness clean. The night is gone now. You're home. The world outside hums again. Roosters crowing, rivers whispering, people waking to lives that will never touch yours. You sit by the doorway, watching the morning light creep across the muddy floor, slow and golden, like forgiveness. The air is still thick with faint traces of what you carry, but you've stopped noticing. You've learned that smell is just memory made visible. And this one, though unkind, is yours. You think about all the jobs the world calls important. Merchants counting coins, priests counting sins, nobles counting titles. And you can't help but laugh softly. All their splendor stands upon what you shovel away. The city's beauty, its peace, its very breath. All of it built upon the unseen labor of hands like yours. You're tired, but not bitter. You've earned your rest, and something more. The rare serenity of those who faced the worst of the world and found meaning in it. If anyone ever asks you what you do, you might tell them the truth. That you work in the oldest business of all, the one that never ends, never sleeps, never pretends. You might tell them that every civilization has two sides, the glittering towers above and the quiet workers below, holding the world steady while everyone else looks up. And when they flinch, or laugh, or look away, you'll just smile. Because you know something they don't. You've seen what keeps the world alive, and it's not gold. It's what lies beneath it.